In my past life, I was blind to the truth and treated a prostitute as my own sister. I gave her silk and brocade, taught her poetry, literature, music, and painting, and even introduced her to the crown prince's flower-viewing banquet. In the end, she turned around and climbed into the bed of my fiancé, the crown prince, then turned on me, accusing me of abusing her. The crown prince demoted me to a lowly maidservant and, on my wedding night, had her force-feed me poisoned wine with her own hands. Sister, didn't you rescue me from the brothel all those years ago just so I could trample you underfoot today? She laughed so hard her whole body shook. The crown prince toyed with my hairpin and sneered. Shen Zhao, you get what you deserve, now that I've been reborn. I stand at the entrance of the brothel, smiling at the woman who once pleaded with me, tears streaming down her face, to buy her freedom. This time, it was my turn to show her what true retribution looked like. Main text. Inside the spring breeze pavilion, the sound of lewd music filled the air, mingling with the stench of cheap perfume and low-grade liquor, making one's head spin. I stood amidst the chaos, dressed in the clean, elegant attire of a legitimate daughter of a high-ranking officialis, stark contrast to this filthy place. A woman knelt on the floor, weeping as if pear blossoms were drenched in wine. It was none other than Lu Yingying, the searing pain of poisoned wine burning my throat. The sound of my bones shattering inch by inch exploded in my mind in an instant. That torn flesh and trampled dignity had now transformed into icy hatred, coursing wildly through every fiber of my being. I clenched my fists so tightly that the sharp pain tore me from those blood-red memories, forcing me to regain my composure. Lu Yingying wailed pitifully, every word an exact replica of her past life. I beg you, miss, have mercy and save Yingying from this sea of suffering. Yingying knows her lowly origins, but I beg only for a place of peace. I am willing to be your slave or maid to repay your great kindness. Her performance was heartfelt. Tears glistened on her innocent, pure face, and anyone who saw her would feel pity. The onlookers around me had already begun to point and whisper, "Isn't that the daughter of Minister Shen? She truly has the heart of a bodhisattva. But why is she just standing there? It looks rather pitiful." Soon, the tone of the gossip shifted. The legitimate daughter of the minister's household, how can she be so cold-hearted? Is she going to stand by and watch her die? TSK. You really can't judge a book by its cover. Listening to these harsh remarks, my heart remained completely unmoved. In my past life, it was precisely this so-called kindness on dignity thought held me hostage, leading me step by step into hell. I wasn't going to be foolishly soft-hearted like I was before. I looked down at her from above, my face full of scorn. You want me to save you? Sure. A flash of triumph flickered across Lu Yingying's eyes. She thought I was still that fool Shen Zhao she could manipulate at will. She immediately began kowtowing frantically. Thank you, miss. Thank you, miss. Watching her cringe in utter humiliation, my smile grew even colder. I ignored her and turned instead to the old madam standing beside her, her face plastered with a smile, her eyes sharp and calculating. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly through the noisy hall. I'll pay for this woman, but not to buy her freedom, just to buy her for one night. In an instant, the entire spring breeze pavilion fell silent. Everyone stared at me with disbelief, as if I were a madwoman. The smugness and gratitude on Lu Yingying's face froze. She jerked her head up, her face ashen, staring at me in disbelief. The madam was also stunned, momentarily unable to react. I pulled a heavy bag of silver from my sleeve and tossed it onto the floor, where it clattered loudly. Is this enough? I added calmly. Tonight. Have her cleaned up and sent to Commander Li's residence in the western part of the city. Everyone in the capital knew that Commander Liu, man past 50 and rather portly, was a notorious sadist. 9 out of 10 women sent to his bed went in standing upright and came out lying flat. No. Lu Ying screamed in terror. She was completely panicked, scrambling toward me and clinging desperately to my leg. Miss, I'm sorry. Please don't do this to me. I'll do anything. Please. Her warm tears and snot stained the hem of my expensive skirt. I felt nothing but nausea. I lifted my foot and kicked her away without mercy. She fell to the ground, limp and boneless, letting out a pained moan. I pulled a pristine white handkerchief from my sleeve and carefully wiped the tip of my shoe where she had touched it, as if it were stained with the filthiest thing in the world. My gaze was icy. A scum like you dares to touch me. Lu Yingying was completely dumbfounded, lying limp on the ground and staring at me, her eyes filled with fear and venom. The madam snapped out of it, her face immediately breaking into a wide grin. She deftly picked up the silver pouch from the floor, weighed it in her hand, and laughed so hard her wrinkles crinkled into a ball. Enough. Enough. Miss Shen is truly a woman of her word. Someone, come here. Hurry up and help Miss Yingying down. Take good care of her. She's to be sent to commanderly tonight. Two burly matrons immediately stepped forward, each taking one of Lu Yingying's arms. No. Let me go. Shen Zhao, you venomous woman. You'll meet a terrible end. Lu Yingying struggled desperately, screaming and cursing. I watched coldly as she was dragged away by force, her tear-streaked face twisted by fear and rage into a hideous grimace. I felt no satisfaction, as I had imagined, only a cold, desolate emptiness. Revenge. This was only the beginning. This pain was nowhere near enough, not even 1/10th of what I had endured in my past life. I turned to board the Prime Minister's carriage, but a commotion erupted behind me. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has arrived. My footsteps faltered, and the fingers hanging at my sides clenched instantly. Xiao Jinghen, my fiancé from my past life, the man who had personally cast me into hell, dressed in a jet-black brocade robe. He dismounted from his fine steed with an upright posture. His hair was bound by a golden crown, and his features were as handsome as I remembered from our first meeting. Yet now, those eyes that had once captivated me were filled with displeasure and scrutiny. He strode purposefully toward me, his brow deeply furrowed, and his first words were a blunt, unyielding accusation. Zhao Zhao, when did you become so cruel? He had heard everything that had just transpired. Zhao Zhao, that name, which had once made my heart flutter, now sounded nothing but bitterly ironic. I couldn't stop the cold laughter echoing inside me. In my past life, you demoted me to a lowly maid, as you stood by and watched Lu Yingying force me to drink poison wine. Did you ever once ask why I was being wronged? What was your heart made of back then? I suppressed the surging emotions within me, slowly curtsied in a posture so flawless it was beyond reproach. Yet my tone remained flat and distant. It was merely a lesson for a girl who didn't know her place. Your Highness overstates the matter. Xiao Jinghen clearly did not believe my explanation, his piercing eyes fixed on me, as if trying to read something in my face. He waved his hand, and the guards behind him immediately understood, turning to enter the Spring Breeze Pavilion to inquire. Soon, the guards returned with a report, repeating Lu Yingying's tale of her pitiful background. Xiao Jinghen's brow furrowed even deeper. The look he gave me was tinged with obvious reproach and disappointment. He took a handkerchief from his bosom and held it out to me. It was a fine piece of Suzu embroidered silk, adorned with several branches of snow-defying winter plum blossoms stitched in gold thread, my favorite design. He had given it to me just last month. I remember it clearly. On the night I was sentenced to death in my previous life, he had held an identical handkerchief, gently wiping the wine stains from the corners of Lu Yingying's mouth as she laughed heartily. That image, like the sharpest blade, sliced viciously through my heart once more. The raw, bleeding pain left me nearly unable to breathe. I reached out expressionlessly and took the handkerchief. Xiao Jinghen's expression softened slightly, thinking I had relented. But the very next moment, right in front of him, I slowly bent down and used that exquisite, luxurious handkerchief to meticulously wipe the tip of the shoe I had just kicked Lu Yingying with. Once, twice, as if it were stained with some unspeakable filth. When I was done, without even glancing at it, I casually tossed the now soiled handkerchief to the maid standing beside me. "It's dirty. Throw it away." The entire room fell silent. The maid's hand trembled with fright, and she nearly dropped it. Xiao Jingheng's face shifted from pale to green, then from green to black in an instant of truly spectacular display. As the crown prince, he had never been defied like this by anyone, especially not by me, his fiancé, who had always been meek and respectful toward him. "Shen Zhao." He gritted his teeth, almost forcing my name out through clenched jaws. I, however, acted as if I hadn't noticed his fury. I lifted my head and gave him a faint smile. "Does your highness have any further business?" My unyielding demeanor infuriated him, and he forced his anger down to demand, "Why have you changed so drastically?" The smile on my face deepened, yet my tone carried just the right amount of respect and consideration. "Perhaps because I am soon to marry into the Eastern Palace. This humble maiden wishes to learn in advance how to ease my lord's burdens and eliminate those unnecessary troubles." That single sentence left him speechless. He was the future monarch, and I was the future empress, dealing with a lowly courtesan who sought to climb the social ladder from any perspective. It could hardly be considered a mistake. If he continued to harp on the matter, it would only make him, the crown prince, appear to be squabbling with his fiancée over a prostitute, a loss of dignity. Xiao Jingheng's chest heaved violently a few times, but in the end, he swallowed his words. He gave me a deep look, his gaze complex and inscrutable, filled with anger, doubt, and a probing intensity one could not fathom. He turned his head and gave a cold order to the guards behind him. "Go investigate that woman named Lu Yingying. If her background is clean, take her from Commander Li and send her to the guest villa." With that, he swung himself onto his horse, not sparing me another glance, and rode off into the distance with his retinue. I stood where I was, watching his eager retreating figure, my heart as clear as a mirror. In my past life, it was my pleading that led him to rescue Lu Yingying from the madam's clutches. In this life, even though I've pushed Lu Yingying into another abyss, he will still take the initiative to pull her out. Their fateful entanglement was, after all, predestined. So be it. It saves me a great deal of trouble. I turned and climbed into the carriage. The last trace of a smile vanished from my face, leaving only boundless coldness. In the end, Lu Yingying was saved by Xiao Jingheng after all. She was placed in a villa under the crown prince's name, living a life of luxury and comfort. Although Captain Li was a lecherous and brutal brute, he dared not offend the crown prince. Xiao Jingheng merely sent a message, and Commander Li obediently sent Lu Yingying away before he'd even had a chance to touch her. This woman always has such good luck. But I'm in no hurry. Good luck always runs out eventually. Lu Yingying had been staying at the villa for only a few days when she began to grow restless. He found every possible way to slip me a note. The letter filled with tearful expressions of gratitude, claiming she owed it all to my failure to save her, which had turned misfortune into fortune, allowing her to meet a benefactor as noble as the crown prince. Between the lines, it was brimming with boastfulness and provocation. I tossed the note straight into the brazier and watched it turn to ashes. Seeing that I ignored her, she hatched another scheme. She bribed one of the matrons in my household to stage a chance encounter while I was taking a stroll in the back garden. She was dressed in simple white robes, her face bare of makeup, looking pitiful and vulnerable. The moment she saw me, she dropped to her knees with a thud, tears streaming down her face. "Miss Shen, I beg you to let Yingying stay by your side. Yingying knows it was His Highness the Crown Prince who misunderstood you. I am willing to apologize to you in person, begging only to remain by your side, to serve you faithfully, and to repay your kindness." She wept as she recounted her hardships, portraying herself as a pitiful soul who was grateful for kindness yet powerless to control her own fate. I knew this performance wasn't meant for me. She was putting on a show for the spy Xiao Jingheng had planted by my side. She wanted Xiao Jingheng to believe that, despite the injustice I had done her, her heart still belonged to Medhat. She was a kind and magnanimous young woman. At the same time, she was sending a message to Mao warning that with the crown prince backing her now, she was no longer the woman she once was. The feeling of being watched and manipulated was like countless tiny needles pricking my back, dense, relentless, and impossible to shake off. As I watched her kneel there, her familiar face gradually merged with the smug expression she'd worn in my previous life after climbing into the crown prince's bed to flaunt her victory over me. Murderous intent churned within me, but on my face, I wore an expression of hesitation and compassion. I hesitated for a long moment before sighing and personally helping her to her feet. Very well. Since you insist on this, you may remain by my side as a third-class maid. A flash of resentment and contempt crossed Lu Yingying's eyes, but she quickly concealed it, kowtowing to me with tearful gratitude. She thought I was still that gullible, brainless Shen Zhao. She thought that once she entered the Shen mansion, she would have countless ways to trample me underfoot once again. She was not wrong in her thinking. But this time, it remained to be seen who would be trampling whom. A few days later, the seventh princess, the most favored in the palace, came to visit my residence. This seventh princess was the empress's only legitimate daughter. Having been raised by the emperor as the apple of his eye since childhood, she had developed a spoiled, arrogant, and haughty disposition. What she hated most was when others wore the same clothes or used the same incense as her. She saw it as a challenge to her status. In my previous life, I had no shortage of trouble from her over such trivial matters, but in this life, she has become the sharpest blade in my arsenal. I assigned Lu Yingying to host the seventh princess. Before the seventh princess's arrival, I accidentally had the matron of the household report the newly received tribute items to me right in front of Lu Yingying. There is also a bolt of cloud brocade, a new tribute from the western regions, shimmering with radiant colors perfect for the seventh princess's taste. Additionally, there is top-grade dragon saliva incense, which the princess loves to use. Everything has been prepared and awaits the princess's arrival. As I spoke, I casually sighed. Though this brocade is fine, its colors are too garish, they don't suit my complexion, and this dragon saliva incense is far too overpowering. The scent gives me a headache. Let's store them in the storeroom for now. I saw Lu Yingying's eyes light up the moment she heard the words brocade dragon saliva incense. It was a raw, unmasked greed and jealousy. She yearned to escape her lowly status and rise above others, so she would seize every opportunity to make herself appear more noble and distinguished. She would certainly have her eyes on these items. Sure enough, when the seventh princess arrived, Lu Yingying was dressed in a brand new, dazzling cloud brocade gown, her body exuding a rich scent of dragon saliva perfume. As she sashayed gracefully to greet her, she clearly intended to show off in front of the princess and the other noble ladies, hoping to outshine me, the rightful heiress. The moment the seventh princess laid eyes on her, her expression darkened. When she caught the familiar scent of dragon saliva perfume, her fury flared even more. How dare you? The seventh princess pointed at Lu Yingying. Trembling with rage, a lowly maid dares to wear the cloud-patterned brocade reserved for this princess, and use the dragon saliva perfume meant only for me. Do you want to die? Lu Yingying was terrified out of her wits. She never expected the seventh princess, who was usually so kind to beauties, to fly into such a rage. She fell to her knees with a thud, her whole body shaking like a sieve, and looked at me tearfully, hoping I would intercede on her behalf as I had done before. However, before the seventh princess could erupt, I had already stepped forward and stood before Lu Yingying. Under the stunned gazes of everyone present, I raised my hand and, with all my strength, slapped her hard across the face. A sharp, resounding smack echoed through the room. How dare you, to steal the tribute prepared for the princess? I shouted harshly, my face contorted with anger and panic at being dragged down by a servant. Lu Yingying was stunned by my slap. One side of her face instantly swelled and turned red, and a trickle of blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. She stared at me in disbelief, her eyes brimming with venom. My slap had been perfectly timed. It not only cleared me of any involvement in front of the seventh princess, proving I knew nothing of it, it also cemented Lu Yingying's guilt of theft, leaving her with no defense. More importantly, my Anjuran punishment successfully stoked the seventh princess's fury even further. Stealing tribute. Very well. This is an outrage. The seventh princess laughed bitterly in her fury. Guards, drag this insolent, worthless servant out and flog her severely. 20 lashes. Lu Yingying let out a piercing scream, but 2 burly matrons clamped their hands over her mouth and dragged her out like a dead dog. Soon, the muffled sound of the cane striking flesh and Lu Yingying's uncontrollable cries of pain echoed from the rear courtyard. I stood where I was, my face still bearing a look of shock and disbelief. Yet my heart was utterly calm. Lu Yingying, this is only the beginning. What you owe me, I will make you repay. Every last bit. And double. Lu Yingying received 20 strokes of the cane, leaving her flesh torn and bleeding. She was bedridden for a full 3 days. Upon hearing the news, Xiao Jingheng immediately sent men to bring her back to the villa Torcover. He also had a pile of expensive medicinal ointments delivered to me, ostensibly to soothe my nerves. But in reality, it was a warning. The eunuch who delivered the message said in a sarcastic tone. His Highness said that Miss Lu is frail and innocent-bearded. He asks Miss Shen to be more lenient with her in the future and not to go too far. Innocent-bearded. A woman who managed to survive in a brothel and even win the crown prince's favor, could she possibly be innocent-bearded? Xiao Jingheng, are your eyes blinded by lard? I laughed coldly as I had the servants take the items away, severing the last shred of affection I'd held for him. He and I were now sworn enemies, bound to fight to the death. Soon, the Empress's flower-viewing banquet at the Eastern Palace arrived. In my previous life, it was at this very banquet that Lu Yingying and Xiao Jingheng conspired against me, ruining my reputation and bringing me to ruin. In this life, I had once again received an invitation, and Xiao Jingheng had actually brought Lu Yingying along with him. As if it were perfectly natural, she wore a simple white gown, her face painted to look sickly, her lips devoid of color, and she walked as if a gust of wind might knock her over at any moment. That pitiable appearance drew the sympathy and attention of many. Halfway through the banquet, amidst the revelry of song and dance, Lu Yingying, holding a wine cup, staggered toward me. She reached my side, but before she could speak, she accidentally slipped and fell right at my feet. The wine in her hand spilled directly onto the hem of my skirt, and as she fell, her sleeve slipped down, revealing a sliver of her snow-white arm. That arm was covered in crisscrossing purple bruises, a sight that was truly shocking. Ah! She let out a stifled cry and quickly covered her arm with her other hand. As if trying to hide something, she looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, and gazed pitifully at Xiao Jingheng. Her voice choked with emotion. It's not sister's fault. It was Yingying who was careless and tripped. Her desperate attempt to cover up the truth instantly ignited a firestorm in the room. Everyone's gaze shifted from Herr Horrificarm to me. Those eyes were filled with contempt, condemnation, and disbelief. My goodness, those injuries. Could Miss Shen have done that? How cruel. She looked so delicate, how could she possibly have done such a thing? This was the moment Xiao Jingheng had been waiting for. He slammed his wine glass down, leaped to his feet, and strode toward me with the stride of a dragon and the gait of a tiger. Looming over me, he demanded harshly, Shen Zhao, is this what you meant by treating her well? Is your heart made of stone? His voice boomed with imperial authority and irrefutable fury, ensuring every person present could hear him. He intended to condemn me in front of all the princes and nobles. This scene, this exchange, how strikingly similar it was to everything that happened in my past life. In my past life, faced with this sudden frame-up and my fiancé's interrogation, I had long since turned pale with fear. I had frantically tried to explain, only to make matters worse, ultimately cementing the charge of malice. But this time, I did not panic. I didn't even rise from my seat. I simply held my wine glass steadily, gently swirling the amber liquid within. As I surveyed the faces around me, some furious, some hypocritical, and some simply relishing the spectacle, this extreme coldness granted me an extreme calm. I raised my eyes, looking past the enraged Xiao Jingheng to Lu Yingying, who was still putting on a show on the floor. I spoke softly, my voice not loud, yet carrying a peculiar penetrating quality. Little sister, are you certain this injury was caused by me? Lu Yingying froze under my gaze. She read an ominous foreboding in my calm eyes, but the show had already begun, and she had no choice but to grit her teeth and carry on. She wept even more fiercely, as if she'd suffered the greatest injustice. Sister, please don't say another word. Yingying doesn't blame you. I truly don't blame you. Ha! I laughed. I set down my wine cup. The crisp clink echoed with startling clarity in the deathly silent banquet hall. I rose slowly and clapped my hands. Dr. Li, you may come out. No sooner had the words left my mouth than an elderly man dressed in official robes and carrying a medicine chest emerged slowly from behind a massive screen at one side of the banquet hall. It was none other than the head of the Imperial Medical Academy. Dr. Li. Everyone froze, including Xiao Jingheng and Lu Yingying. They never imagined I had arranged such a surprise in advance. Dr. Li walked up to Lu Yingying, bowed to the crown prince and the empress, then knelt down, took her arm, and began to examine it thoroughly. He even took out a white handkerchief and gently wiped her horrifying bruises. The purple-blue marks immediately faded significantly. Imperial physician Li stood up, clasped his hands in a bow toward the crown prince, and spoke in a steady, authoritative voice. Your Highness, Her Majesty the Empress, the marks on this girl's arm were not caused by blows, but were fabricated using pig's blood mixed with ginger juice, purple grass, and other substances. When applied to the skin, though they appear terrifying, they wipe away with a single swipe and cause not the slightest harm to the body. If this humble servant is not mistaken, this is precisely the sort of cheap trick used by charlatans to stage accidents and extort money. The moment these words were spoken, the entire hall fell deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. The blood drained from Xiao Jingheng and Lu Yingying's faces in an instant, leaving them as pale as paper. Lu Yingying trembled like a leaf in the wind, muttering, No. No. I didn't. I walked up to them, ignoring Xiao Jingheng's gaze, which was a mix of shock, embarrassment, and anger. I knelt down and gave Lu Yingying an incredibly gentle smile. I reached out and, as if soothing a frightened little animal, gently stroked her icy cheek. I leaned close to her ear and, in a voice only the two of us could hear, said, word by word, Little sister, since you love acting so much and love making a fool of yourself in public, how could your big sister not grant your wish? Lu Yingying's pupils suddenly contracted. She stared at me in terror, as if I were a demon crawling out of hell. I stood up, ignoring her. I turned around, my gaze sweeping over everyone present, finally settling on Crown Prince Xiao Jingheng, whose face was ashen and who looked so mortified he wished the ground would swallow him. I spoke aloud, my clear, resonant voice echoing throughout the Eastern Palace. Since your Highness cares so deeply for little sister Yingying that you would slander me, her fiancé, in public for her sake, I, Shen Zhao, am not the sort to be unreasonable or force others into a difficult position. I renounce the title of Crown Princess. Let it go to my younger sister instead. I publicly annulled the engagement. Those 4 words struck like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through the entire high society. The legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's household had annulled her engagement to the Crown Prince in front of the entire court and the imperial concubines. This was an unprecedented event in the history of the Great Zhou dynasty. Xiao Jingheng's face was beyond description. It was a sight to behold. Caught off guard by my decisive move, which had pulled the rug out from under him, he was utterly humiliated. To preserve his pitiful dignity as Crown Prince, he could only vent all his fury on Lu Yingying. berating her as cunning and scheming, plotting against the crown princess. He ordered her expelled from the East Palace on the spot. A meticulously planned flower-viewing banquet ultimately ended in a scandalous farce. Upon returning to the chancellor's residence, I went straight to my father's study. I knelt on the floor and begged for forgiveness from my father. I recounted everything that had happened at the Eastern Palace banquet, laying it all out exactly as it had occurred. I did not embellish or exaggerate. I simply stated the facts. I emphasized how Crown Prince Xiao Jingheng, for the sake of a brothel girl of unknown origin, had repeatedly disregarded my dignity and that of our Shen family. My father, Qin Jingyan, the current chancellor, valued balance and reputation above all else in his life. He had long been dissatisfied with Xiao Jingheng's recent frivolous behavior. But due to the distinction between sovereign and subject, he had kept his grievances to himself. Today's incident was undoubtedly the final straw that broke the camel's back. A crown prince who cannot control his own emotions, who is so easily swayed by a woman that he is willing to jeopardize relations with his future in-laws, is by no means fit to be a wise ruler. Entrusting the future of the Shen family and my own futurito such a man would be nothing short of a gamble. After hearing my account, father remained silent for a long time. The atmosphere in the study was oppressively heavy. After a long pause, he sighed and personally helped me to my feet. Zhao, you've been wronged. His voice carried weariness and disappointment. This matter, it was my oversight. I shook my head, my eyes reflecting just the right amount of concern. Father, your daughter is not worried about being wronged. What worries me is that there seem to be other forces backing Lu Yingying. Otherwise, how could a mere woman like her have frequent access to His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and know so much about the inner workings of the court? I casually steered the conversation toward the power struggles within the court. Drawing on my memories from my previous life, I pointed out the recent suspicious activities of several key figures within the Crown Prince's faction, as well as the subtle signs of their corruption and factionalism. As someone caught up in the midst of these affairs, father might have noticed some of this, but he certainly couldn't see it as clearly as I, an outsider. I've heard, father, that Vice Minister Wang of the Ministry of Revenue recently took a new concubine whose dowry alone amounted to 10,000 taels of gold, and the son of Minister Li of the Ministry of Works has been lavishly spending his fortune in the suburbs, purchasing a garden from a previous dynasty. Every word I spoke felt like a nail driven deep into my father's heart. Where did these core members of the Crown Prince's faction obtain their wealth? The answer was self-evident. Having navigated the political arena for half a lifetime, Minister Shen instantly grasped the stakes involved. His expression grew increasingly somber, until finally, he slammed his fist down on the table. You good for nothing. You're utterly useless. He was furious. He began issuing orders, instructing his trusted confidants to secretly gather evidence against these men. Once the Shen family's finely tuned machinery began to turn, its power was staggering. Cutting ties with the Crown Prince had become inevitable. Afterward, Xiao Jingheng came to the Chancellor's residence to see me, attempting to salvage the situation. He thought I was merely acting on a moment's impulse, that if he humbled himself and spoke a few kind words, I would obediently return to his side as before. I had the gatekeeper turn him away outright, without even granting him an audience. Furthermore, I issued a public declaration. The legitimate daughter of the Shen family will not be a concubine, nor will she share a husband with another, nor will she deign to associate with a man of such depraved character who favors his concubines and neglects his wife. Once these words spread, they completely dashed all of Xiao Jingheng's hopes and made the entire capital witness my resolve. Meanwhile, Lu Yingying, who had been expelled from the Eastern Palace, found herself with no other options. Just as I had predicted, she threw her lot in with another, the Crown Prince's archrival, the third prince, Xiao Jingrui. My informants quickly relayed the news. On the very night she was expelled from the Eastern Palace, Lu Yingying appeared at an inn frequented by the third prince, where Shekins met Xiao Jingrui. She resorted to her old tricks, using her tearful, pitiful pleas to successfully capture the third prince's attention and sympathy. When I heard this news, I nearly burst out laughing. Lu Yingying. Oh, Lu Yingying. You're always like this, never short of benefactors to aid you. Little do you know that these so-called benefactors are nothing more than death warrants hastening your demise. What kind of reputation can a woman who flits between two princes possibly have? I immediately sent someone to discreetly pass the news that Lu Yingying had been cast aside by the crown prince and had now thrown herself into the third prince's arms, the empress's palace, disguised as casual gossip. The empress values the imperial family's reputation above all else and detests such shameless, fickle women. Lu Yingying's good days were coming to an end. The third prince, Xiao Jingrui, was a sullen and calculating man. The crown prince Xiao Jingheng's strongest rival in the court. He took Lu Yingying in. Of course, not out of any chivalrous pity. Lu Yingying was a woman discarded by the crown prince. She knew many of his private affairs and was, in and of herself, of great strategic value. Keeping her close at hand would both infuriate the crown prince and serve as a pawn against him. Why wouldn't he take advantage of that? And so, Lu Yingying transformed overnight into the new favorite at the third prince's villa. Believing she had found a new patron, she grew increasingly brazen in her behavior. I decided to give her a little more help. Through a young palace maid who had done me a favor in a past life and now served in the third prince's residence, I secretly offered Lu Yingying some guidance. The maid accidentally told Lu Yingying, "Our prince most admires women who are intelligent, ambitious, and capable of devising strategies for him. Just crying and whining won't win his highness's heart." Lu Yingying fell for it. Just as expected, she was an ambitious woman to begin with, and upon hearing this, she felt she had finally found a direction to strive toward. She began going to great lengths to impress the third prince, no longer merely playing the role of a delicate, innocent white lotus, but instead began whispering words of advice in his ear. Using information she'd gleaned from Xiao Jingheng, she urged the third prince to impeach officials aligned with the crown prince in the imperial court and succeeded time and again. Seeing that she was indeed useful, the third prince grew increasingly fond of her. Lu Yingying was intoxicated by this temporary victory, growing ever more convinced that as long as she could help the third prince topple the crown prince, the position of third prince's consort was hers for the taking. I watched her fall step by step into the trap I had dug for her, a smile deepening at the corners of my mouth. The time was nearly right. I had that palace maid advise Lu Yingying once more. If you truly wish to become the third prince's consort and secure your position, you must achieve a monumental feat. For instance, you must completely ruin His Highness the Crown Prince's reputation, ensuring he never recovers. Lu Yingying was deeply moved by these words and pressed for a plan. I then recounted to the palace maid an absurd incident from my past life that had caused Xiao Jingheng to lose face and been rebuked by the emperor for immoral conduct. In my past life, during a royal hunting expedition, Xiao Jingheng, in his eagerness to capture a rare white fox, galloped wildly through the mountains and forests. As a result, his horse bolted and collided with an innocent villager who had gone up the mountain to gather firewood. Injuring him, his rival leaked the story, causing his reputation to plummet throughout the court and the realm. Through the palace maid, I relayed the exact time, location, and personal details of that villager to Lu Yingying. Lu Yingying seized upon this information as if it were a treasure. She presented this plan, word for word, to the third prince. The third prince was overjoyed upon hearing it. Deeming the plan flawless, it would strike a blow against the crown prince without implicating himself. Soon, the annual imperial autumn hunt began. Following the plan, the third prince sent men in advance to lure the white fox onto the path Xiao Jingheng was bound to take. True to form, Xiao Jingheng, overcome by the thrill of the hunt, spurred his horse into a frenzied chase. Everything unfolded exactly as scripted. A piercing scream rang out, and a woodcutter collapsed to the ground. The third prince immediately appeared on the scene with the imperial censor, seizing the evidence of the crown prince's crime off riding recklessly and injuring a civilian. News of the incident spread rapidly. reaching the emperor's ears. The emperor flew into a rage and, in front of all his ministers, severely reprimanded Xiao Jingheng, accusing him of acting without benevolence as a ruler, and behaving immorally and recklessly. Xiao Jingheng was at a loss for words. His face ashen. The third prince and Lu Yingying both believed victory was assured. However, what they did not know was that I had already prepared a contingency plan. That accidentally injured villager had indeed gone up the mountain to chop wood. But he was also someone I had arranged in advance at great expense. While the imperial physician was treating him and everyone was gathered around, a bag of silver and a note accidentally fell from his bosom. The note bore the third prince's family crest and the words, "A further generous reward awaits upon the completion of this task." And that bag of silver was none other than funds from the third prince's treasury. The situation turned on its head in an instant. It was true that the crown prince had committed moral transgressions, but the third prince's framing of his elder brother was an even graver crime. The scandal of fratricidal strife was laid bare before the emperor and all the ministers in the most humiliating manner. The emperor was so enraged he nearly fainted on the spot. And Lu Yingying, the one who had suggested this plan, instantly became the eye of the storm. She was now resented by both sides. The third prince regarded her as a harbinger of disaster. If not for her ill-conceived scheme, how could he have ended up in such a predicament? Crown Prince Xiao Jingheng hated her with a vengeance. Believing she had betrayed him to side with the third prince and used such a vicious plot to harm him, Lu Yingying found herself in a no-win situation, reduced to a useless pawn, and was ruthlessly cast out by the third prince. This time, there was no patron to save her. Lu Yingying was abandoned once again, and this time, she felt more desperate than ever before. She had fallen from the clouds into the mud, experiencing the full spectrum of human cruelty and indifference. Both the crown prince and the third prince regarded her as a thorn in their side. There was no place left for her in the capital. Under the weight of such immense despair and resentment, a person could lose their mind. Lu Yingying did go mad. She staked everything on a single move, devising the boldest and most insane scheme imaginable. She would follow in the footsteps of the seductive concubines of past dynasties and seduce the emperor. As long as she could win the emperor's favor, even if only for a single night, she could turn her fortunes around. Then, whether it was the crown prince or the third prince, they would all have to bow before her. By selling off the last of her valuable jewelry, she bribed a low-ranking eunuch in the palace. Intending to tamper with the emperor's soothing herbal tea, she planned to use a potent drug that stirs romantic longing and clouds the mind with desire. Unfortunately, her every move had long been under surveillance by the spies I had planted. The moment she received that packet of powder, my men had already swapped it out. We replaced it with a drug that took longer to take effect but was far more potent, one that would induce hallucinations and mental confusion. At the same time, I bribed the young eunuch she had contacted. I gave him a large sum of money to slightly alter the time and location for delivering the soup. With everything in place, we simply waited for Lu Yingying to walk right into this trap. Tailor-made for her, a banquet was held in the palace. Lu Yingying had bribed someone to disguise her as an inconspicuous palace maid, allowing her to slip inside. She believed her plan was flawless. At the banquet, she timed it perfectly and drank what she thought was the antidote, but in reality, it was the catalyst I had the young eunuch slip her. She waited with glee for the drug to take effect, anticipating the moment she would rise above everyone else. Soon, the potion took effect, but the sensation was completely different from what she had imagined. She felt no stirrings of desire, only dizziness and a burning heat throughout her body. Everything before her began to blur and warp. In a daze, she stumbled along the path guided by the young eunuch and burst into a secluded chamber. She assumed the emperor was inside, resting after a night of drinking. She threw herself at him, using her last ounce of strength to tear at his clothes. In the darkness, she couldn't make out his face. She could only smell a musty, rotten stench, the scent of someone who had never seen the light of day. Early the next morning, a shriek pierced the palace's morning stillness. Lu Yingying, lying disheveled with a man, was caught red-handed by a patrol of guards. And that man was not the emperor, whose power spanned the realm. Rather, it was the old, ugly, pockmarked eunuch who served as the chief eunuch of the imperial household department. Scandalous debauchery within the palace walls. This was a crime of the gravest magnitude. Lu Yingying went completely mad when she realized who was lying beside her. She let out a scream that was barely human, frantically scratching at her face and body. She screamed that Shen Zhao had framed her, that Shen Zhao was trying to kill her. Alas, who would believe the ramblings of a madwoman, a lowly concubine who had committed lewd acts with a eunuch? Her mouth was gagged, and she was dragged away and thrown into the imperial prison. What awaited her was the harshest punishment the law could impose. As for me, I was at home at the time, leisurely savoring a fresh cup of tea, upon hearing the news relayed by my servants. I merely gave a casual order. The tea has gone cold. Bring me a fresh cup. The crown prince and the third prince had thoroughly enraged the emperor by turning against one another and framing each other during the imperial hunt. Both were stripped of their titles and confined to their mansions, forbidden to leave for the rest of their lives without an imperial decree. In the imperial court, the political landscape shifted dramatically. My father, Qin Jingyan, using Thecluzai provided, had long since distanced himself from the crown prince's faction and, amidst this turmoil, successfully preserved the Shen family's influence. The fifth prince, Xiao Jingming, whom I supported, was steady and humble, diligent in governance and compassionate toward the people. He remained unscathed in the struggle among the princes, and in contrast to his brothers, appeared all the more virtuous and wise. After enduring the pain of losing a son and a series of disappointments, the emperor finally saw clearly who was the most suitable heir. Soon after, the fifth prince, Xiao Jingming, was formally designated as the new crown prince, to win over the Shen family and to appease me, the legitimate daughter who had suffered so much injustice during the engagement scandal. The emperor issued an edict betrothing me to the new crown prince, Xiao Jingming. For a time, the Shen family was the talk of the court. As for the deposed commoner Xiao Jinghen, he was confined to the princely mansion that had once been his own, drowning his sorrows in drink day after day. Reduced to a pitiful state, he blamed all his failures on my betrayal and scheming. He had long since come to hate me with a passion. Lu Yingying was sentenced to death by hanging for the crime of corrupting the imperial harem. On the day before her execution, I secretly intervened and bribed the guards at the imperial prison. She died of illness inside the prison, wrapped in a straw mat. She was cast into the mass grave, but she was not dead. I rescued her, tended to her wounds, and then sent someone to secretly deliver her to Xiao Jinghen's side. My intention was to reunite these two enemies, abandoned by the entire world, to let them, in their endless despair, seek warmth and solace in one another, only to unleash their final and most frenzied hatred. I know them all too well. They are the kind of people who, as long as there is hope, will never accept defeat. Sure enough, two people whose minds had been twisted by hatred hit it off immediately. They plotted what they believed to be a tragic, heroic act of revenge. On the day of my grand wedding, they planned to infiltrate the Prime Minister's mansion and, in front of all the guests, assassinate venomous woman. They intended to use my blood to wash away their shame. On the day of the wedding, the Prime Minister's mansion was decked out in festive lights and decorations, the air filled with joyous celebration. I sat in my bridal chamber, dressed in an elaborate, crimson wedding gown and wearing a phoenix crown, waiting for the auspicious hour to arrive. Everything was exactly as I had anticipated. The mansion's guards had long since been quietly replaced by elite troops from the Eastern Palace, dispatched by the new crown prince. The entire prime minister's residence was as impregnable as a fortress. The auspicious hour had arrived. The wedding attendants supported me as I walked step by step toward the front hall. Just as I was about to take my final bow to my parents, two men dressed as servants suddenly burst from the crowd. In their hands, They each clutched daggers gleaming with a cold light, charging straight toward me with clear intent. Shen Zhao, you venomous woman. Give me your life. Xiao Jingheng's eyes bulged with fury. His face contorted by mad hatred, a far cry from the handsome man he once was. By his side, Lu Yingying wore an equally venomous and resolute expression. The guests let out a series of gasps, and the scene descended into chaos. Yet before they could reach me, guards surging in from all directions effortlessly pinned them to the ground. Their struggles seemed so laughable and futile in the face of these well-trained elite guards. I stood where I was, not even shifting the hem of my skirt, dressed in the most festive crimson wedding gown in the world. I looked down on them from above, as if observing two overconfident ants. Xiao Jingheng, Lu Yingying. I spoke softly, my voice calm and unruffled. It's been a long time. Xiao Jingheng was still cursing wildly. Shen Zhao, may you die a horrible death. Even as a ghost, I will never let you off. I smiled. I walked slowly toward them and took a tray from a maid standing nearby. On the tray sat 2 cups of wine, placed there with perfect stability. The wine was clear and translucent. Yet in the candlelight, it glowed with an eerie light. I picked up one of the cups and held it out to Lu Yingying, a gentle, kind smile on my face. On such a joyous day for my elder sister, how could her younger sister not come to share a toast? I did not deal with them in the front hall, where the guests were gathered. That would have been too easy for them. I had them dragged into the deepest, darkest, and dampest dungeon of the Shen family. Here, the sun never shines, and the air is thick with the stench of decay and blood. I took off my elaborate wedding gown and put on the simplest, plainest clothes, just like in my past life, when I was demoted to a lowly maidservant. In the dungeon, I had a simple farewell banquet set up, 2 sets of bowls and chopsticks, and 2 cups of poisoned wine. Xiao Jingheng and Lu Yingying were bound to their chairs, their mouths stuffed with cloth, able to utter only muffled mumbles. Their eyes were filled with fear and despair. Step by step, I walked slowly toward Lu Yingying. I removed the cloth from her mouth. I held the cup of poisoned wine before her eyes, just as she had done to me in my past life. I mimicked her tone from back then, repeating her words one by one. Crystal clear. Sister, didn't you rescue me from the brothel all those years ago just so I could trample you underfoot today? Lu Yingying began to tremble violently. Her eyes widened in terror as she stared at me, as if she had seen a ghost. You. She wanted to speak, but her extreme fear left her unable to utter a single word. I paid no heed to her reaction. I walked over to Xiao Jingheng again and removed the gag from his mouth. From my hair, I pulled out his favorite hairpin, the last plum blossom hairpin he had ever given me. I toyed with it leisurely right before his eyes. With a cold smile, I returned to him, word for word, the very words he had once spoken to me. Xiao Jingheng, you get what you deserve. At that moment, his mental defenses completely collapsed. This crown prince, who had once stood so high above everyone else, this man who had once regarded me as nothing more than an ant, was now weeping uncontrollably. I was wrong, Zhao Zhao. I was truly wrong. Forgive me. I beg you. Forgive me. He screamed and thrashed about, a pitiful sight. I watched him, feeling not a shred of pity, only the thrill of revenge. Forgive him. Why should I forgive him? Who will forgive my child, who turned into a pool of blood before even seeing the light of day? Who will forgive the pain of my throat scorched by poisoned wine? The agony of 1,000 arrows piercing my heart. I wasted no more words on him. I walked up to Lu Yingying, grabbed her chin, and forced another cup of poisoned wine down her throat. Then, holding the cup she had drunk from, I walked over to Xiao Jingheng. Don't kill me. Xiao Jingheng was still begging for mercy. I coldly clamped my hand around his neck, forced his mouth open, and made him watch as I poured every drop of the poisoned wine which Lu Yingying had personally handed to his mouth. Drink it. This is your cup of shared wine. I let go. The two of them writhed in agony on the ground, rolling and convulsing. Black blood oozed from the corners of their mouths. Their eyes were wide open, staring fixedly at me, filled with resentment, regret, and endless fear. I watched silently. I watched as they, right before my eyes, bit by bit, breathed their last breaths, until they were completely silent. The blood feud from my past life was finally settled in this moment. I stepped out of the dungeon. The blinding sunlight momentarily dazed me. The darkness and bloodshed of the dungeon felt like a thing of the past. I saw the new crown prince, Xiao Jingming, waiting outside the door. He stood there quietly, still wearing his festive wedding robes. He didn't ask what I'd done inside, nor did he ask about the fate of those two men. He simply took off his cloak and, with gentle care, draped it over my shoulders. His voice was gentle yet firm. "It's all over. It's windy out here. Let's go home." Home. What a warm word. I looked up and, for the first time, saw genuine affection and respect in his eyes, not calculation or exploitation. In that moment, a corner of the ice in my heart seemed to melt. On our wedding night, red candles burned brightly. I confessed part of my past to Xiao Jingming. I kept the secret of my rebirth to myself, telling him only that I had accidentally uncovered Xiao Jingheng and Liu Yingying's conspiracy, as well as the schemes behind it, to protect myself and my family. I had no choice but to proceed with caution and set traps to fight back. He listened quietly, without interrupting me. When I finished, he took my hand and looked deeply into my eyes. "Zhao Zhao, you've been through so much these past years. It's my fault for not discovering this sooner, causing you so much suffering. I promise you this, as long as I am alive, I will protect you with all my might and never let you suffer even the slightest injustice again." His words were not empty flattery, but a promise straight from the heart. I believed him. After our marriage, I assisted my father by revealing, one by one, the names and talents of those loyal ministers and capable generals who had been overlooked in my previous life. I warned them to avoid the pitfalls of the past, allowing them to shine brilliantly in the imperial court. Xiao Jingming also took my advice, swiftly promoting the capable and virtuous, thereby stabilizing the court, which had been thrown into turmoil by the turmoil surrounding the deposed crown prince. Because of me, and due to our close ties with the new imperial family, the Shen family's position grew increasingly secure, and we earned the new emperor's unreserved trust. I was no longer that naive and foolish eldest daughter of the chancellor's household, nor was I that vengeful figure, her heart filled with hatred and her eyes filled with darkness. I became the new crown prince's most capable and wise partner, the future empress. I began to learn to embrace my new life. Several years later, Xiao Jingming ascended the throne, and I became the empress, setting an example for the entire realm. We were a harmonious couple, living in perfect harmony. He kept his promise, showering me with unparalleled respect and affection. In the harem, I was the only one. During an incognito tour, we happened to pass by the once thriving red light district in the southern part of the city. That brothel, once known as Spring Breeze Pavilion, had long since changed beyond recognition. It had new owners, a new signboard, and the girls inside had come and gone in waves. Just as I was about to turn and leave, I witnessed a familiar scene. A scantily clad newcomer knelt at the entrance, weeping as she begged a passing wealthy merchant to buy her freedom. In her eyes and brows, I saw a striking resemblance to Liu Yingying from years past. The same pitiful vulnerability, the same burning ambition. The emperor took my slightly cool hand and asked softly, "What are you thinking about?" I shook my head and smiled at him, a genuine, carefree smile. "Nothing. I just feel that some people, no matter how many times they start over, will always choose the path that seems like the quickest shortcut, even if it's a dead end." We didn't linger any longer. We turned and blended into the bustling crowd. To me, The events of my past life had finally become a nightmare that vanished into thin air the moment I woke up. I no longer needed to rely on the misfortune of others to validate my own happiness. A brand new chapter of my life had long since begun. It was New Year's Eve once again. Inside and outside the palace walls, thousands of households were ablaze with lights, and fireworks bloomed brilliantly in the pitch-black night sky, illuminating the entire bustling capital. The emperor and I, accompanied by our son who had just turned 3, climbed to the highest corner tower of the palace. The child giggled in my arms, clutching my robe with his chubby little hands and babbling "Mommy." The emperor gently embraced me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder, his familiar, reassuring warmth radiating from his body. "What are you looking at, Empress?" I gazed upon this magnificent realm we had safeguarded with our own hands, a land of peace and prosperity, and my heart was filled with tranquility and contentment. I whispered, "I'm looking at my magnificent realm, where the nation is at peace and the people are content." He smiled too, whispering in my ear, "This is our realm. In my past life, I met a tragic end on this very night of universal celebration. My body was not even cold before it was abandoned, forgotten by all. In this life, I stand here, possessing everything I dared not even dream of in my past life. A husband who loves me, a beloved child, supreme glory, and a heart at peace. I am no longer Shen Zhao, the woman burdened by a blood feud. I am the Empress, a wife, and a mother. I have been reborn, truly reborn. I believe this is the best reward for my 2 lifetimes. The story has come to an end. Thank you all for your companionship. See you in the next one.